I'm John Guess. I'm the prominent lawyer here in town, and I was murdered right here in this spot on December 21st of 1913. But let me take you back a little bit. This all started about 4 or 5 years ago when my sweet sister Mary Jane, she was married to Bud Lamb. Well, he was one of the prominent landholders here in Mansfield, had 4 farms, quite wealthy. Well, everyone in town thought that good old Bud was a good old boy, but at home, we knew entirely different. Oh, Bud had a furious temper, and he would often beat my sister Mary Jane and those 2 boys, John the oldest and Jim the youngest. Well, I think it was in July of '09, I believe it was. Well, once again, Mary Jane and Bud get into it over who knows what it was all about. Well, Bud started hitting on my sister, and those 2 boys came in. Well, before it was all said and done, supposedly Mary Jane and John had gone out the door, and Jim stabbed his father to death, and he was laying right there on the floor. Well, being the good attorney I was, I came to the defense of my sister and my 2 nephews. Now, they charged Jim with the murder, but we all knew it wasn't Jim. John was like his dad. He was bold and he was always angry and fighting with everybody. But poor little Jim was more like my sister, Mary Jane. And besides, he was just a scrawny little boy, had tuberculosis, and there's no way he could have killed his pa. But John claimed that he had nothing to do with it. So they let John go and give poor little Jim 10 years in jail. Well, we filed an appeal right away, but before we could ever get to court, that poor little boy had lost his mind, and we had to put him in a sanitarium over in Fort Worth. Well, my sister, she just couldn't take all the gossip from the old women in town and everything, so she moved to Fort Worth also. Left everything to John to take care of those 4 farms. Well, he was squandering the money, he was irresponsible, and I tried my best to guide that boy, being family, Well, he didn't want nothing to do with it, and he was threatening me back and forth. Well, it was December 21st, and I was right in here in Ward's drugstore doing a little bit of Christmas shopping. They got the nicest things for Christmas here. Well, in come this lady through the door, screaming and yelling that my nephew John was out to kill me and coming in here to shoot me. Well, I didn't bring my gun, I'm going Christmas shopping. So I ran up here to Doc Knight's office thinking he surely brought his gun that day. Well, no. He had forgot it and left it at home on the kitchen table. So as I came out the door here, there stood John at the bottom of the steps. Shot me right through the heart, that good-for-nothing nephew of mine. Left me laying here to bleed to death. Well, he took out the side door and around and headed down Main Street to the lumber yard down there. And the constable, he was after him and shooting, and people Christmas shopping, and there's guns flying and bullets flying everywhere. Well, wouldn't you know it that fool nephew of mine shoots the constable in the leg, for God's sake. Well, then he heads back home and shoots at our nephew. Well, anyway, the next day in Dallas, they caught up with him. Gave him 30 years for killing me and shooting the constable. That wasn't the end of it, Back in 21, that fool governor of ours, he decides to pardon John and let him go. So he comes back to Mansfield, wouldn't you know? Well, he got his due, because while he was in the hooscow, he caught one of those diseases and died 2 years later. Well, it gets me so riled up to talk about this. I just can't handle it. Now, just skedaddle. All of you skedaddle. You're just getting my blood pressure all raised up. It's not good to get a ghost like me all excited.